if I
A
ignore
cat,
him.
a cat named Cal.
Yes,
Does he look like a cow?
he's pretty big.
We are live. Tom Luongo, thank you for joining me.
Thank you, Marty. How you doing today?
Doing well, doing well. We had a big week in Miami at the Bitcoin conference last week. I came back
Right.
Saturday, and now I have my wife's sister and our brother-in-law and their kids in town. So it's been a long run here, but I'm excited to sit down and speak with you. It seems like the global spring has sprung, sir.
Mm, yeah, that's one way of putting it. Yeah, I didn't. I went to Bitcoin 2021 last year, but I didn't go this year, and I kind of wanted to go, but I just didn't have the time or the bandwidth actually, put it together and make the trip. And I'm only 300. I'm in North Florida, so it's not actually that big a deal for me to go down there. But how was it this year?
It was a great event. It was a great event. It was a lot of fun.
Yes. Yeah.
Um, Very productive for me as well. We did a live podcast there on Thursday, and then I was on a is ESG an attack on Bitcoin panel on
Hmm.
Friday morning. And that was well attended and very contentious, um, as one may expect.
Yeah, it's an interesting point. I mean, I'm so caught up in the ebb and flow geopolitics at this point, and obviously what ESG is means to commodity and energy investing, that I haven't really thought about it from the perspective of Bitcoin per se. But I mean, they had a panel on that last year. It was Kevin O'Leary covered a panel about how the miners, should they or should they not, color their bitcoins as to whether or not they're environmentally friendly or not. We're like, no, shut up. And so yeah, I mean, I hadn't really given that a lot of thought recently, but it's an issue simply because these freaking people will just not let anything go, and every and any challenge to their potential power or perpetuating their power is just going to attempt to be shut off, and they're going to do it in the most ham-fisted way imaginable, and they're going to do it in the most underhanded way imaginable. So it is what it, but we know this is coming, and there's just so many. I just look at the whole Bitcoin market as a whole and the whole space at this point, that the brightest minds in the world are against them, and they're the oldest, most dullest minds in the world, and they have power, but like they don't have any precision, right?
No, and another thing too,
And no, go ahead.
they don't have meme power. Like I think we can win the narrative battle. I'm
Yeah,
becoming more confident in this. Is that I think we're better at distilling information and getting it out there, and
yeah.
most importantly, pointing out how hypocritical and dangerous they are. I mean,
Oh
the
yeah,
ESG is dangerous. It has put us in the situation where we have food shortages, we have unstable energy markets, and we're becoming less secure year by year because of maybe it's not ESG specifically, it's certainly a factor in it, but these people trying to micromanage a global economy.
well, I mean, they are technocrats and they are communists, so what do you expect? I mean, it's just that simple. And I don't, people get angry with me when I reduce all of this stuff down to communism, because I think communism is a little too freaking fashionable, if you want my honest opinion. That it's not cool, dude. It's just not. It's actually really destructive and terrible, and it's a mindset. It's not an economic system, and anybody who tries to like play it off that it is an economic, it's not. It's a mindset. And the mindset is total and complete control over the way you operate. And I know this well enough. It's no different than when you talk to hardcore objectivists within libertarian circles. At the end of the day, it all just winds up being one big stupid purity spiral. And if you're not part of, the if you're not part of the group that has the truth, then you will eventually be ousted. And this is exactly what will happen this is exactly what, well, effectively Davos is doing now. And they're doing it to everybody. And now they're doing it to the entire world. Like, they've fomented a war in Ukraine with Russia. And now they're using every aspect of their political power to perpetuate a conflict that should have already been over, that under any other normal military circumstances, Ukraine would have surrendered.
Yeah, why is it?
And
Why isn't it over?
it's not over because they don't want it over. It's just that simple. Zelensky is being told not to surrender, because the minute he surrenders, then Ukraine would cease to exist effectively as a state, right? They would have to now start dealing with terms. They would have to start, negotiating terms of settlement as to what happened, as to who gets what and how much is owed and all that stuff. And the one thing that will happen in all of that is the presentation of evidence, which, while this isn't a court case per se, think about it like a court case. And what's the one thing that these people, the bankers on Wall Street or Hillary Clinton or any of these evil freaking people, what do? Whenever there's a potential legal challenge to out them in public, what do? They settle out of court before you ever get the discovery. So part of the whole point of extending the official conflict, and this is why Russia's failure to take Kiev is so important, because had they taken Kiev, this would be a done deal. Because they would have lost the capital, and then Zelensky could not surrender in exile. But you don't have a country to not surrender, dude. You're Juan Guaido at this point. You're just some dude, and denying reality. So that's part of the reason why this isn't, because they want this war to continue, because they want World War III, and they want World War III because they have failed to just fully get everybody embraced into the post-COVID narrative of vaccine passports and the total surveillance state, and they haven't gotten enough of us on the in line with them, having fallen in line. And Russia, China, and most of the global South has also refused this, and because of that, they have to go to war with them, because their goal is global domination. Their goal is to right the wrong of the Soviet Union and the last push towards global communism, which was that they got Russia and China to fall, but they couldn't get the West to fall. And they firmly kind of believe this idea that if we could just get everybody on the same system, it'll all work eventually. And it's a very naive thing. It's like talking, like multi old leftists I used to argue with when I was a member of the Libertarian Party, and they would make these like pie in the sky arguments about this stuff, and you're like, no, it doesn't work that way. Like, that's not the way human beings are wired, and we're never going to get to that state, so stop arguing for it. And this is what who are stuck in touch with reality, and so suffused with their own sense of righteousness and their own sense of rightness that you can't reason with them anymore, and you can't cut a deal with them, because they're not interested in cutting a deal. They're interested in subjugation, and they're convinced that the world can only sustain 1 to 2 billion people. So therefore, we have to get rid of all these useless eaters, or we have to put them on UBI and let them run video games and porn and keep them from revolting. They've been saying the Fiat part a lot recently, and it's really quite scary.
It's very scary. Your internet connection seems to be coming in and out, but I think I caught most of what you're saying. I also think one thing that I heard you say recently is really encouraging. These people are dumb to an extent. Like their hubris has gotten so large and they've gotten so complacent. I mean, vaccine rollout is a perfect example. Like they've pushed that on the world, and it's becoming obvious that it's poisoning people. And you have people fleeing Moderna and Pfizer en masse right now. It seems like it's going to become glaringly obvious that was a terrible, terrible mistake that was made. They're not going to be successful in fomenting enough strife amongst the people and be able to say, hey, come into this digital panopticon. They're definitely going to get people all pissed off. People are going to go hungry, and energy is going to be more scarce. But I don't think they're going to be able to use that to push us into the CBDC.
Yeah, no, and this is the thing that really is bothersome, is that they are kind of failing, while at the same time as they think they're winning. That's the scary part about it. They're on a script. They don't have any other options. And yeah, I have been known to say that, like, power doesn't make you smart. Power makes you stupid. It makes you indiscriminate in the way you use it. And you don't have to be sharp and precise with your application of power. You just have to say, well, we're going to do this. And as Dick Cheney, not Karl Rove, even though this quote is attributed to Karl Rove, it was actually Dick Cheney who said it. So, like, we're in the reality generation business. We generate reality, which then you spend all your time trying to figure out what reality we created. And by the time you figure out what reality we created, we're off to the next reality that we're creating for you. That is kind of Davos writ large. They are moving forward along every vector of this even though they don't have universal or anything close to universal consent for it. And there's competing technologies out there like Bitcoin, especially, and I use Bitcoin as a metaphor for all hard Bitcoin style proof of work coins. Okay. I'm not a Bitcoin maxi, but
Mm-hmm.
I'm a proof of work maxi, right? Screw proof of stake. I mean, I don't mind proof of stake for financial purposes, but it should only be built on a platform. It should be built on a monetary foundation of hard proof of work, because the creation of new monetary units has to come with opportunity cost. It has to come with human toil. It has to come with a human making a decision to do something with his time, to impute value to his time, and then tokenize it, which is what Bitcoin does, which is what proof of work does in the larger sense. And Bitcoin is the best example of this. Whether or not Bitcoin is technologically capable of taking us into the next age is irrelevant, because we're not living in the next age yet. And so the whole maxi argument to me is just kind of, it's like libertarians arguing about Ancapistan, or communists out arguing about come the revolution, what we're going to do, the glorious workers' paradise. Like, none of these things are going to happen anytime soon. These are processes that you move towards, and you allow the market and you allow people to figure out what technology is going to be best. Proof of work is the technology that matters here, not the particular coin itself. So,
Yeah.
in my mind,
Yeah, Bitcoin's winning the proof of work battle. That's like Bitcoin's winning the proof of work game by
it may,
orders of
and
magnitude.
I'm not against the idea of that.
Well,
I'm just always willing to be skeptical that that's going to happen. Like I own everything. I like Bitcoin. I like gold. I like some of the other coins. I don't have any problem with that. And I'm not a matter, and I don't want to get into that weed, because I just don't think that's. I think that's another one of these false dividing lines between people who should be agreeing, right? I think the whole Bitcoin maximalist argument is just another purity spiral that leads people into bad places. Like, let's not argue about that. We both agree that proof of work is great. Let's move on and go fight the real fight, which is central bankers,
yeah. Well, this
freaking
is
oligarchs.
yeah. Again, we don't have to get in the weeds of this, and
Right.
people would consider me a Bitcoin maximalist, but I don't like purity tests either.
Right.
I
That's fine.
I focus on Bitcoin, and specifically Bitcoin mining. So I'm like in the Bitcoin mining world, buying natural gas wells and plugging in generators and mining Bitcoin with it, and sitting on the board of a company that's mining Bitcoin in the U.S. But that's like, so that, speaking of replacing central bankers, that's what.
Sure.
So the mining layer is going to replace the Fed window essentially. You're not going to replace central bankers in the sense that you have people actually dictating any interest rate associated with Bitcoin or the supply, obviously, but you'll have the window replaced, where the facilitation and distribution of new monetary units happens there, and then you'll have financial applications built on top of it. And when you play that out into the future, and it's just like a really cool thought experiment to walk down, is we're going to have energy companies replacing central banks, essentially, because energy companies have the lowest cost of energy.
Energy production, exactly. Yeah, no, absolutely. My friend Junseth, calls Bitcoin an organism that feeds on energy subsidies.
It does,
and kills them. It's a very apt metaphor. I really like that. I really like that idea. Junseth's
description of miners as energy pirates is one of my favorite.
Yeah. It's a brilliant observation. It really is. So yeah, and you can see that happening all around the world, and it's obvious. I find it really interesting to see how I've been saying this for a long time. I'm like, well, it's an obvious ploy at some point for the Russians to turn around and legitimize Bitcoin mining as a legitimized industry within Russia, because who has the lowest cost of energy generation in the world, other than nuclear? Well, it's going to be the Russians, and either oil or natural gas, because they pull it out of the ground for less than everybody else. And, until the day comes when the ruble is so freaking strong, we'll cross that bridge when we get there, that that it becomes expensive to mine Bitcoin in Russia. I just don't see that happening anytime soon. They literally pull it out of the ground for, a current rate somewhere between $7 and $9 a barrel. Like, it's ridiculous. And even with tariff costs to the government, it's the Russia's break even point is a sliding scale, but even at this point, it's like $40 a barrel. But if it gets below $40 a barrel, then the tariff goes away, and they're back to producing for $9 to $20 a barrel, depending on the producer. So it's ridiculous. Like it is. It's just truly ridiculous. So it's just why, the Russian regulations on Bitcoin, while not good or perfect from any anarcho libertarian perspective, is a framework for legitimate businesses to go that forth, mine Bitcoin, and add it to the existing banking system, and to allow the existing banks to act as intermediaries to get around sanctions, and to allow companies to operate, out of the shadows. It's still going to at the end of the day, Bitcoin's still going to tear the Russian central bank apart, but it won't. But it doesn't have to do so tomorrow.
Yeah, how does this play out in the long run? If Bitcoin is allowed to proliferate as an industry in Russia, is that an erosion of Putin's power over time?
It's so far in the future that it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, it's we're talking about something 10 years from now. Like Putin will be out of power. Putin will be retired by then. He doesn't want to do this forever. If he's even alive by then, if we haven't killed him by then, like let's not get too far out of the world of reality. Let's just talk about let's just talk about where the incentives lie today. This is the world I live in right now. This is the way I analyze the world. Is just to go through and go look at where people's incentives are at a particular moment in time. And those things are going to shift as the rules change and as the conditions change and as people react in real time to, move, counter move, point, counterpoint. And so you could see the Russians, for example, preparing for a war they knew was coming by finally pushing through cryptocurrency regulation and making it, legitimate part of the banking system. A couple of weeks before the invasion, they lifted the VAT on gold purchases. So Russian people can go and buy gold without having to pay a value-added tax up front in order to, in effect, preemptively strengthen the ruble or strengthen not the ruble, but the Russian domestic capital position by saying, look, you don't have to go trade out into dollars or euros or something else. You can trade out into gold, and it won't cost you anything other than the spread. And that spread, between Russian gold dealers or between you and the bank should be less than, some foreign currency trader under sanctions. So that should keep the capital from fleeing once the war that they knew was coming started, and the sanctions that they knew were coming came. Right. So
yeah. No, it's fascinating. I was going through your Twitter feed this morning too, in preparation for the chess moves are happening so quickly now. Like you were talking about Le Pen in France, like potentially taking out Macron, and here with like Russia and everything going on, it's very interesting to see this all unfold very quickly. You have riots and movements happening all throughout the world, or like Sri Lanka, whatever is going on in Shanghai is just like another added variable to the mix.
So, it's funny, Marty, I was, before, this morning, I took a break working on my taxes, which is always, a vomit inducing experience.
I was doing that this morning too.
Yeah. It's terrible. To work on a blog post, a public blog post, which I haven't, written anything in a few days. So I hate to not water the blog. So I was working on a piece this morning. I'm about half finished with it, just trying to go through all of the regime change operations that are in play on both sides right now. I look at the situation as it stands. You had Imran Khan was deposed in Pakistan over the weekend. We've got Sri Lanka. I haven't even really thought about Sri Lanka, but you bring it up. It's a great point to bring up that they're going to default on their debt. You've got the obvious regime change operation going against Putin right now with all the sanctions and everything else to try and get, to try and impose regime change on the Russians. It's not going to work. You've got a potential regime change in anger in France. You've got a potential regime change operation by necessity in the United States, where Barack Obama is clearly angling to get rid of Joe Biden before the midterms. So, all of the, and the way I was approaching it and trying to approach it in the article is to say, look, war is terrible. War is never the answer. But, underneath the fog of war, brings clarity to all the political positions of all of the people who are on the knife's edge, as vis-a-vis this war, as to why they decided to go to war in the first place. Because everybody deciding on on going to war, standing on a knife's edge. Should I or should I not? Step to the right and go to war, step off the knife's edge and go to the left and back off and sue for peace. And everybody in the West chose to step right, while the Russians were kept saying, "Hey, why don't we step left? Let's just agree to some terms, and you guys back off in Ukraine. We'll sell everybody gas. We'll have a good day. Let's just end this." And by going to war, we now see just how tenuous the positions of various leaders are in the West, and how strong Viktor Orban in Hungary was for standing up and saying, "No, I'm not for this war," and why Biden is in trouble for prosecuting it, why Boris Johnson is even in trouble. His poll numbers continue to drop, and why Emmanuel Macron is in serious trouble of losing the second round to Marine Le Pen, who's not like the greatest gift to France, like since de Gaulle or anything. She's actually really quite weak, but anything would be better than Macron. But then again, I was listening to some commentary by Alexander Mercouris over at the Duran the other day, and he made a very good point, saying that, and I love Alex. I always like giving Alex his due whenever I can. Made the very good point that even if Macron wins, I don't know if he, and Martin Armstrong also made this point, which is even if Macron wins, the anger in France is so palpable against him that it may cause a complete uprising within a year in France anyway, that he may not even last, simply because, or a year or two or whatever, simply because, the French couldn't bring themselves to hold their nose and vote for the far right Marine Le Pen, who is anything but, she's only far right in the minds of French communists, which is it's ridiculous. That's like, I know that's redundant, but and if they just if the people who voted for Jean-Luc Mélenchon, the kind of left populists who almost made it to the second round, he came in at 22%. He was only a point and a half behind Le Pen.
Mm-hmm.
Imagine if the scenario in Mariupol with the French Foreign Legion and the French generals that were trapped in Mariupol, if that had actually become bigger news in France earlier in the election cycle, like a week earlier, and had become big news, Macron could have lost the first round, and it could have been Le Pen versus Mélenchon, because it's really close. If it wasn't for basically the French boomers, because the only demographic he won was the old people. So everybody else is like, we're done with these Davos fuckers. We're just done with these people. We don't want them. And so the anger in France is so palpable that it could easily force a regime change and the end of the Fifth Republic in France. And every young Frenchman that I've talked to, and I've talked to a few, because I have a friend of mine locally who's French and plugged into this, and he and other people that I talked to all say the same thing. They're like, the Republic doesn't work anymore. It doesn't function. The government doesn't function. It's even less functional than the Constitution is here in the United States under the Democrats, which is obviously not the case here. So it's really weird, like where we are. We're in this moment of time where this war has broken open and laid bare everybody's vulnerabilities, including Putin's.
Oh yeah.
And it's going to be very interesting to see how this plays out, because it could play out in ways that no one is expecting. And if that is the case, now which would be, it would, and I'll be honest with you, I hope it is something like Macron gets overthrown, Mario Draghi gets overthrown in Italy. The Democrats are in such disarray for the midterms they can't even, cancel the election and, under martial law, because that's what they're going to try and do. They're going to try and do that.
I mean, it sounds like they're trying to bring COVID back.
So that they can print a whole bunch of ballots and just steal the election again.
Yeah, you have Hunter's laptop becoming top of mind again. It seems like people are getting ready for an indictment there, which is very interesting. You had Rep. Johnson, I believe, who was on Fox News with Maria Bartiromo. I forget. I'm not going to pretend to pronounce her last name right now, but
Bartiromo.
Bartiromo.
I'm Italian, dude. That's like it comes naturally.
They were talking about it. Seems like something's going on there. Yeah, and then you had Jen Psaki come out yesterday and try to prep people for the inflation print today. That was an interesting tell there, as to how
Yeah,
worried
no.
they were about
Yeah,
today's.
and then gold broke higher by $40 today.
Yeah.
You're watching gold today, but gold hit like a high in 1980, and silver busted through to nearly $26. That's a big deal. Like silver is technically breaking to $26. That's like kind of this. It's got to hold it through the end of the week. It's only Tuesday, so we have to get through Friday where they'll come in and bomb the thing and move it down $1.50 in 20 minutes because somebody decided it's a good idea to sell $7 billion worth of silver in 4 minutes.
What's going? What's
the other
going?
one plays jingle bells.
What's your perspective on the precious metal markets? Are COMEX and the London Metal Exchange, are they just pure manipulators? Like,
Oh yeah.
Can these precious metals break the manipulation?
Yes.
Given the scenario.
Yeah, they can. And the way it's going to happen is it's a combination of things, and it's complicated because there's a lot of moving parts. But the first is that the Russians have effectively tied the ruble to gold, which then ties it to oil, which then ties it to natural gas, wheat, and all the commodity space. So as Zoltan Pozar put out the other day in a note from Credit Suisse, saying that we're on the verge of Bretton Woods 3, which would be a return to a commodity money standard, which I don't disagree with whatsoever. The Russians have made that now abundantly clear that this is the path we're going to take. What Putin has done is to do the exact opposite of what Kissinger did in 1973 with the Saudis to establish the petrodollar. When oil was at its highest point, had just quadrupled in price back in 73, that's when they pegged the dollar to oil. Right? So what has Putin done now? Putin has pegged the price of oil to gold at a similarly high price.
Mm-hmm.
And now it's going to force the price of gold up to match the real cost of extracting commodities. No longer will the futures market be the price maker in gold and silver, but they'll be the price taker as the vaults on the LBMA and the COMEX are drained, or more gold has to come out of storage to flow through the system. And because one of the things about gold, right? And we're all Bitcoiners here. We all know what stock to flow ratio is, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Which, by the way, is a brilliant idea by Seyfedin Ammous. And I absolutely, the minute I saw it, I went, oh my God. So you're just going to quantify Mises's regression theorem. You're a stud. That's brilliant. I literally said, that's brilliant, right? Because you now have a metric by which you can say something has monetary character, and you're going to assign a number to it.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So higher stock to flow ratio equals higher monetary character, and lower stock to flow ratio indicates no monetary character. Silver, by the way, has no monetary character. Its stock to flow ratio is like Litecoins. It's almost zero. Okay. So and silver has so many industrial uses that it's being outcompeted as a monetary asset, right? Competition for silver is why it's no longer a monetary asset. Yeah, it's got other uses.
Well, yeah, the whole silver meme that's been going around for the last few years has been an interesting one to me. I've got a silver bull cousin who texts me every once in a while. He's like, silver's.
Like, I own silver, and I like silver, and I think that silver, when gold gets really freaking expensive, is going to go ballistic. But only as a function of the silver to gold ratio, just because people will be looking for value. They'll be looking for something that's undervalued. Mm-hmm. Okay. And silver can acquire temporarily monetary character during times of crisis at this point. It did in 2011, going from $4 to $50. Like, dude, I was buying silver at $4 back in 2003 when I had black hair. When I had hair. Like, so it seemed like the beard was still black. Like, I could only turn around and go, see that little bit of gray? That's because I abused myself badly in my 20s. But back in 2003, I was buying silver at $4 an ounce. I was buying hundreds of ounces of silver at $4 an ounce. I'm not dumb. Like, this is ridiculous. It's not going to go to 3. And even if it does, I'm buying at 3. And then what does it do? It hits a peak. It hits a ridiculous emotional peak at 50, but it was never sustainable above 30. right? So
Where's it now? You said $26.
yeah, about $26, which has been technically speaking, been the Maginot line for the current trading range since the August 2020 high for both the precious metals, when gold hit a new high at just short of 2,100 and silver went back to 30. Silver has been trading in a very volatile range between 22 to the downside and 30 to the upside, with the average true price being $26 for a year and a half now, almost 2 years. When it breaks above 26, I would say on a monthly closing basis, if you're not buying silver, you're an idiot. I don't give a shit what you think about silver. You can think it's the dumbest investment in the planet, but I got news for you. It's going to go to $50 if it monthly closes above $26 at this point. Just basic chart analysis and understanding the supply and demand fundamentals will tell you that. The macroeconomic space, especially if gold is going to do the same thing. If gold is breaking to new highs, eventually the silver to gold ratio gets so stretched that people just pile into silver, and then there's no supply. And there's no reason to believe that silver is not going to benefit from the ruble being tied to gold either. Remember, just because we're talking about gold and oil and natural gas, hey, the Russians produce a lot of silver too, oh, by the way. But that's not the point. The point is that commodities across the board will be tied together against the price of gold. And if you look at the price of industrial metals across the board, every one of them has at least doubled in the past year and a half. Aluminum, tin, lead, copper. Well, maybe not copper, because copper is a different thing, but almost all of them. Nickel, all of them have gone completely ballistic as supply chain crunches occur here. Silver is the only one that has not really moved with the rest of the market. Now, part of that is because of the chip manufacturing issues and the slowdown, the supply chain crisis within technology, which is where a lot of its end use is. Fine. We break that bottleneck. And why would you believe that silver is not undervalued at $26? The problem is that like everything else is there's a massive amount of hedging and rehypothecation within both markets that have just suppressed the price. And Bitcoin, by the way, Bitcoin is dealing with all this now. Bitcoin doesn't trade like Bitcoin anymore.
Yeah,
Bitcoin trades like gold.
What's going on? It's been in this weird consolidation. We're at 39,804 here. It feels like there's no way it could be this subdued in this range for this amount of time, considering what's going on in the world.
Yeah. So let's go back to the bull market of 2016, 2017. What broke the bull market in 2017? It wasn't any kind
futures,
of emotional high.
CME.
Yeah, it was
literally to the day.
Futures. Yeah, literally to the day. The futures started trading on the COMEX. Cash settled Bitcoin futures started trading on the COMEX. Off-chain cash settled futures started trading on the COMEX, and Bitcoin hit a peak and was done. Speculative money that used to have to go on-chain now could go flow around and all the big boys could go play around in that space. Okay. Well, today we not only have that, we have on-chain settled futures. We have all sorts of stuff going on. We have massive leverage on all these centralized exchanges like Bittrex they're all like
Binance.
Leaving my head at this point. Binance, thank you. That's the big one. I could not, for the life of me, bring Binance out of my brain. It's really sad. But yeah, when you have all that kind of leverage trading going on, when you have all this stuff happening, when Bitcoin looks like your typical offshore Greek Forex market, I got news for you. There's a lot of people just moving stuff around. And at the end of the day, on-chain statistics still matter. And so eventually you will push the price down far enough. Eventually you will dry up the supply of sellers, and then the thing will explode. Never forget that all bull markets climb a wall of worry. So, I know I should be going long Bitcoin at a moment in time when I hear a whole bunch of people talking about Bitcoin going back to $9,000.
Mm-hmm.
Same way when people start telling me, "Oh, gold, it's going to go back to $1,000 and blah blah." I'm like, "I'm really buy." Like silver gets to 2180, and everybody's like, "You could go to 12." I'm like, "Yeah." Putting in an order to AppMex right now. I want some pre-1963 dimes. Like, it's not tough. Like, it's a typical contrarian indicator when you get a market that bearish, that you have nobody on the bullish side of the trade and everybody's bearish. One buyer forces two sellers to start covering, and then all of a sudden the short position is what is the fuel that drives the market higher off of that imbalance. And so that kind of, that's what the professional guys like Turk Ferguson and others try to talk about when they're talking about when they're talking about the positioning on the COMEX, to try and figure out where the leverage is. Is it net long or net short, and then use that as a positioning tool to see where they are. Fine, it's great. I don't play in that space anymore, but I absolutely respect those guys who do it. I can't do that stuff. That's not my gig. So, but I think Bitcoin is now the plaything of Wall Street, professional prop traders, and you're going to have to start thinking about it in the same way that gold bugs have to accept the fact that, yeah, it'll move when it moves.
Get your
there'll have to be a catalyst that takes it higher.
Get your coins off the exchange. Don't let them rehypothecate. Does that help?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, why? It's not your keys, not your coins, right?
Yeah.
Same thing about gold. If it's not in your hand, you don't own it. I've been telling people that for 15 years about gold and about Bitcoin. I've been saying the same thing forever. Like, don't ever keep your coins on Coinbase. Coinbase is a bank. You're an unsecured creditor to the bank.
Yeah.
Your deposits on Coinbase, you as a depositor to the bank, which is Coinbase, means that you are an unsecured creditor of the bank. You are the last person to get paid if the bank goes bankrupt. The bondholders get paid first.
Yeah.
Everybody else's. You are the last person to get paid. You will get bailed in. So
we need to get to somebody like Michael Saylor and be like, "Yo, dude, get your coins off the exchange." And, you have 150.
If he's holding his coins on the exchange, he's an idiot. Like I love Michael Saylor, but he can't be that dumb. Like, he can't be that dumb. Like, it's not a big deal if he's leaving his coins on the exchanges. He's asking for an ass kicking. Like,
yeah, I don't know if he's got maybe I'm not sure. I don't know exactly.
I mean,
unless
unless from a fiduciary perspective of the company, he's not allowed to take them to cold storage.
I think that's
if the board has said you're not allowed to do that, well, that's a different. Then I'll take back what I said about being an idiot. I'll say that the board is collectively are idiots.
Yes,
and so
if that's the case, I think that's a lot of the case in a lot of these publicly traded companies that have gotten into Bitcoin, and then their boards prevent them from holding it.
From holding it in cold storage, huh? I wouldn't be surprised. Well, it's like they all have ESG compliance boards now they have to deal with as well. So it's like it's all terrible.
Yeah.
But it's funny, especially tax season, right? Tax season is always that time when it really sharpens your mind about just how much they've destroyed the world. Like, when you sit down to think about how much money they actually want from you, when having built a middle-class lifestyle, to then say, oh, but you owe us 35% of your income.
Yeah. And here we're going to go or give it to all these defense contractors.
And then it goes to what? Like, I'm going to send all that money. You're sending my money to Ukraine to launder back into Nancy Pelosi's slush fund, because you think that money is actually going to go to buy weapons? No, they're going to give the peasants AK-47s and go stand up to the Russian tanks.
Yeah, and it's going to go straight into Hunter Biden's bank account. He's getting paid.
Right, exactly. 10% for the big guy.
It's going to go straight to the pharmaceutical companies so they can create things that poison you.
Well, like I said, they are Malthusians. I mean, honestly, they are Thanos from the Marvel movies. We need to get rid of half the people. There's just too many of you.
You think they really think this?
I do. I do believe they actually think this. I think they've done some bad Malthusian linear math that projects out that without oil, we can only sustain 1 to 2 billion people. Of course, there's plenty of yellow cake in the world to supply enough nuclear power to sustain 20 billion people. But let's not let's not get into that, or thorium reactors or any of these other there's so many other ways of harnessing energy outside of oil, but they have focused on this oil cliff, which I don't even think exists, because like technology being what it is, we always seem to find more oil.
Yeah.
And if you want my honest opinion, I know for a fact that every year they keep uncovering more and more oil, and guys like Chris Martinson over at Peak Prosperity and SRS Rockwell Report, and those guys within that space, they're all like, oh my God, EROEI is just falling, and they're not replenishing reserves, and EROEI being energy returned over energy invested, right? So the amount of energy it takes to get a barrel of oil out of the ground versus the amount of oil you're getting is that ratio is rising, and that's their argument about peak oil. But when you live under a fiat currency standard, and the cost of extraction, the cost and the profitability of extracting oil out of the ground all goes to the banker who financed the loan to drill the well, then all you're doing is depressing innovation into the space of drilling for more oil and exploring for more oil. The oil industry as a whole, just functionally, has been under a 50-year depressing, disincentive to explore for new oil only when it's actually absolutely necessary to replace barrels we pulled out of the ground last year, and not one more than that, because there's no profit in it otherwise. And it's especially clear when you start really diving into what the fiat currency standard actually does, which is it's a purely extractive system where commodities are priced literally at an erg of energy above the cost of extraction, and everything else, the profit that they should get as a first order good, which isn't going to be high in the first place because the first order good, it's crude oil. So first order goods should have very low profit because you're only just, because, for all intents and purposes, crude oil is crude oil, even though that's not true. So light sweet's different from heavy sour, which is different from this. But in general, light sweet may be 5% may have an IRR of 5%, and heavy sour is only 3%. I mean, whatever, it doesn't matter. It's in a very small range. But the profit margins on naphthalene, gasoline, and everything else is going to be 8 to 10%. And then, the things you build, then the drugs you build with the naphthalene, then the other stuff you build with those precursors should have higher rates of return, because that's the value added chain. Otherwise, we wouldn't be doing this. So when you really stop to think about what the debt-based fiat system does, it ensures that all the profit from resource extraction goes to the very people who issued the money in the first place at zero cost to themselves. Then they turn around and invest in all the higher level technologies built on that surf model of commodity extraction, and then use that to suppress everybody else's creativity in the marketplace, i.e., Twitter, Facebook, Apple, blah 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 blah, the biotech companies, the drug companies, yada yada yada, like the media companies. That's where they're all invested.
Yeah,
they all own those boards.
It's pretty evil.
Yeah,
I think it's very evil at the end of the day.
It's incredibly evil. It's like, and it's good work if you can get it, I guess, but it's completely evil.
Yeah.
And Bitcoin fixes all of this. Gold fixes all of this. And, and that's what has to eventually, and that will change.
Well, it's happening.
It's happening right in front of our eyes, and they don't have any way to stop it other than to like use laws to put people in jail and tax all their profits away. And I'm like, that's nice. Like the way the IRS doesn't even understand its own rules for crypto reporting.
Why do you say that?
It's because they're constantly like not. They're constantly like they obviously say you owe all of it, right? But they also believe that you should pay them you should pay them taxes on any time somebody gives you a gift, or exchange lawn cutting service for dinner. Like, they expect you to report that income. Like, does anybody report that income? Do they have control over that income? Like, they don't even, like, really, when you stop to think about what they have legal, statutory, like, and no one's challenged this yet, and someone will, purview over. It's dollar-based transactions and nothing else. Like,
really?
Make the argument that crypto-to-crypto transactions are actually a taxable event. It's a very spurious argument.
Interesting. Somebody take that to court.
Oh, absolutely. They just define things however they want in order to try and force you to, they're stocks, so you got to pay capital gains on them. But they're not stocks. Are they currencies? I mean, especially given that now El Salvador has it as legal tender. How are you going to make the argument that Bitcoin is a commodity, or as a commodity, or worse, a security, like Ethereum's a security, when someone else is using it as legal tender? So now you're
and there's
now you're
isn't there language in like international trade deals too, where it's like if one
yeah,
country recognizes that legal tender, you have to as well.
right. And yes, no, you're absolutely right. And so when you really stop to think about it, that was the big deal with El Salvador's announcement, right? Which is, of course, why the IMF is and the U.S. have been trying to break that as much as they possibly can. And they're pressuring other countries who are thinking about it from actually doing it, right? So, God knows how many Panamanian and Panamanian politicians have had their children, lives threatened, right? Because by these people, because this is the way they operate. Let's not kid ourselves. So, but under that circumstance, like under those rules, if Bitcoin is legal tender, well, screw you. Oh, it's money. You can't tax money. It's like, well, am I supposed to make money? Am I supposed to pay capital gains tax on the euros that I hold?
Right. It's going to get
That's
interesting.
the legal argument they're making.
I know. I agree with you 100%. They're going to try their hardest. Again, like I said, though, they're sloppy, they're dumb, their hubris is at an all-time high, and it's going to be their downfall. And they're on top of that, they're extremely complacent. And like you said, Bitcoin, like I am so pumped just being in the mining space, specifically in oil and gas. Like oil and gas companies are starting to get it. And what's going to happen is you're going to have an oil and gas company, especially with natural gas and crude trading where they are, just realize, oh shit, like I'll just sell my oil and gas for cash, and then I'll roll that into a mining operation, which I'll leverage our waste and stranded energy on. And then we'll just hold the Bitcoin, and we'll hold that through a monetization event where we can break free from the bankers that you were describing who are taking all
and then you
can
use that as collateral to go drill new wells, and you can use the Bitcoin as collateral for a loan to go drill new wells. Like I have a friend in the nuclear industry, and the same thing's happening all across the nuclear space.
In what way?
They're doing the same thing. They're cutting co-location mining deals with energy off the nuclear reactors, because nuclear reactors can only be spun up and tuned down by a certain amount. They have to put out a kind of a constant load, plus or minus a few percent. So when load is low, they have to send that energy to the ground. Well, now they can send it into a Bitcoin mining rig. Yeah. During evening hours when they can pull back production by 5 or 10%, but when demand drops by 40%, then that goes to the ground. People, I've seen Saylor make this argument, and so many people just don't get it. The only industry that is more wasteful than the electricity production industry for wasting their product is fashion. Like most, something like 30 to 35% of all clothes that are produced wind up as pillow stuffings and upholstery stuffings and couches and whatnot. They don't because the clothes aren't sold, so then they get cut up and recycled into upholstery or other things. Same thing in electricity generation. We send 30% of it to ground.
Yeah,
because the grid has to be, because these massive monolithic grids have to be pressurized all the time. Okay, it's just like natural gas pipes. They have to be pressurized. All these people understand like the way these systems work. You can't just turn them off. So in order to supply 240 volts to your house, 100 and 200 amps at 240 to your house, they have to push that all the time, whether you're pulling it or not.
Exactly.
And then whatever isn't goes to ground. And so if we can capture even a part of that, and then you do the math, I think the whole Bitcoin network uses, I think, somewhere between 1/4 and 1/3% of that 30% we send to the ground. So no matter how inefficient you think proof of work is, and Bitcoin's is maybe the most energy inefficient version of proof of work. I'm not saying that it is, but I haven't done the math on other systems. But just let's assume, for argument's sake, that it is. Let's assume that Bitcoin is the.
I think you could.
It's coal.
You can point to data,
right?
Like it's securing.
You could. I just don't know.
Securing the most. It's securing. So like it's securing the most money, 880 billion.
Well, I mean, I actually mean like on a per dollar value, normalized dollar value of the blockchain or whatever. Normalize the value of the blockchain or the cost of difficulty. But it should be simply because the difficulty to mine it is so unbelievably high.
Mm-hmm.
Because right. And so, Monero can't compete, even though if Monero was trading with the same hash rate, it was secured with the same hash rate Bitcoin is, Monero would be 5 times I think 5 times as bad as Bitcoin, or maybe even higher than that, because it's a very inefficient proof of work blockchain because of the extraneous
Yeah.
information has to be encoded in order to do the ring signature privacy thing, right? But even so, even Monero, which would you can consider that coal to Bitcoin's, I don't know, oil, right? As a, like say it's coal versus oil in terms of dirty. Okay, great. So what? It's still living off of waste energy that we've already,
Wasted. People don't
it's
understand
just
this.
throwing it into the ground.
This is
It's
why
retarded.
this is why it's so hilarious, and it is retarded. And it's like people in the public markets trying to so this is why I joined the board of a publicly traded company. And this is why I get in a fight with all the other miners. Not all the other miners. There's some base miners out there who agree with me, but a lot of miners are like, "Oh, we need to prove that we're clean. We're clean. We're clean." I'm like, "No, we don't. Don't apologize to these people. They do not care about whether or not you're clean. Number one,
No.
they want to control you.
Yes.
And number two, do not apologize for anything. You're doing nothing wrong." Like,
Yeah, you're not doing anything wrong. You're using your assets in the way that you think is the best way to use them. To use them. Who the hell are they to tell you otherwise?
yeah.
Like, it's dumb, and it tells you it's such a weak argument that has been blasted out over and over and over again. And Marty, I've done this like with people, both publicly. I've shamed them over this in previous interviews, and then just like dumb people in my circle of friends and family, and they've tried that argument, and I'm like, you do realize that Bitcoin uses 1/4 of 1% of all the electricity we send to ground, right? This is energy we produce, whether we did or it's going to happen, whether Bitcoin existed or not, right? That energy was going to ground. We're not capturing this value. That Bitcoin is nothing but a net good.
Yeah.
It's nothing but a net good, period. It's a way to store the work that we as humans already did that we're wasting because our governments refuse to get out of the business of electricity generation and allow us to have localized interconnected grids where maybe then let's talk about that. If you hate the fact that 30% of the electricity we generate goes to ground, hey, maybe we should talk about like smaller interconnected smart grids built on PEM fuel cells that are large enough to handle to power a neighborhood, run on natural gas, which is very possible, and the technology is out there and would be easy. But no, we can't do that because the county has to provide in the United States, the county has to provide it, or this company's got the franchise monopoly over this area of Florida or this area of the state or whatever. Oh, because we have old dumb freaking laws put in place by tyrannical freaking governments that are getting in the way of improving the efficiency of electricity generation. For what reason? Oh, I think it was just mentioned it. Control. Because why do they want control over that? Because that way, if you don't pay your taxes on your property, they'll shut your power off. You can't get a building permit to build a house on the land that you bought that you're paying taxes on. If you have, if you don't get a building permit from the government, you can't get an electricity drop to your house. I know this. I built my own house. I know what the process is. The process is so ridiculous, and I did it in a county in Florida that has almost no rules whatsoever at the time.
I mean, we've had developers on shout out Kelly Land, and in the past we went over just like the disgusting nature of zoning codes and you force like a cookie cutter shitty model of a house onto the public, and it's another Fiat thing. Like they're only built to last 30 years, the length of the mortgage, and then you have to tear them down and rebuild them. And
because,
imagine,
God forbid you actually pass down generational wealth to your children. You're not allowed to do that because again, that gets back to my original statement. They're communists.
Yeah, and you tell people this, and they don't. I've been saying ESG is a communist movement for
absolutely is
many years. At first, I was derided, told I was paranoid, told I was crazy. But again, now the narrative's shifting, and I think, like, are you optimistic that we can get these tyrannical idiots out of our way?
I think it's going to happen whether we like it or not. The question is whether we're going to have to go through a world war to get it.
I really hope we don't.
Yeah, you and me both. Like, that would be nice. My daughter's turning 16 tomorrow. It would be nice. Yeah. I'm going to take her out to dinner. She's going to get her braces off. And, the poor thing is, living under the sword of Damocles. Yeah. And I apologize to her every day. I'm like, I'm sorry, hon. I'm sorry I brought you into this world, but I couldn't not. because it's just the way it is. I've been apologizing to her, Marty, since like 5 minutes after she was born. Like, we had her at home, and my wife's placenta started, and my wife's were having a problem passing the placenta, so they had to pass the kid to me while her and her midwives dealt with her. So I'm sitting there with the kid, and she's like 3 minutes old, learning how to breathe and learning how to regulate her heartbeat. And I'm like, "Oh, you're beautiful and you're gorgeous and everything else. I'm so sorry." Like, I'm so sorry.
This is all so fucked.
Yeah, it's all so fucked. And yeah, by the time you're old enough to understand it all, you're going to be like, well, at least I know my daughter's base, so that's all that matters. I'm good to go.
Maybe that's how we fix it. We just raise base children.
Yes, that's part of it.
Yes. And so how do we avoid World War III if we can?
We hope, I'll be honest with you, we hope that Putin's gambit to tie the ruble to gold and put the world back on a commodity-based standard accelerates the collapse of the fiat currency system, which is the source of all their power. The ability for them to generate new insane weapons, to pay the soldiers, to pay the massive infrastructures and the skyscrapers and everybody's salaries and everything else, it all stems from that. Now, at the same time, Davos really does want to collapse the global economy in order to build it back better with even more funny money called MMT, central bank digital currencies, afterwards. So I don't know. But, wars end when the checks bounce, when the soldiers' checks bounce.
Well, again, that's what was very interesting about the front running yesterday by Pac. Because hyperinflation is two parts, right? Obviously, you have the expansion of the number of monetary units in the system, right, and then there's the social aspect to it. When people lose confidence, that's when the hyperinflation happens. The hyperinflation, I guess Martin Armstrong, I both love and hate for this because he refuses to admit that the hyperinflation's there. The dollars are all sitting offshore, being sat on, and they're being hedged off and all this stuff, and they exist out there. But what happens when the confidence collapses? Oh, that's when it happens. So the quantity theory of money is not wrong. It's just not usable in a practical context. Context, which is, but the quantity theory of money is correct. You increase the money supply, you are increasing the general price level. There's no way around that. But what matters ultimately is, and it's funny that Armstrong says all these things about the quantity theory of money, and then conveniently forgets that Mises made the same arguments that he did about the quantity theory of money, which is that it ignores the demand side of the equation. Back in 1923, in the theory of money and credit, he did this, right? So we Austrians are not unhip to this idea that there's limitations of the quantity theory of money. God, it bothers me when people make incomplete arguments that they should know better, right? It just bothers me. So the inflation is latent. It's there. It's waiting. It doesn't know what to do. It's the systems like this are metastable. And I'm a chemist originally. I don't know if you know this about me. I did not know that.
Okay, so I have a degree in chemistry and I have a background in English as well. I have a minor in English. But it's 25 years as a bench and research chemist. Okay, I've forgotten more about data quality than most people ever learn. And so in chemistry, right, there are two parts to every chemical reaction, right? You got a molecule over here and you got a molecule over here, and the Gibbs free energy equation says this is a spontaneous reaction and they should make a new compound. But what the Gibbs free energy equation doesn't tell you is that in order to make the two molecules fit together, right, to do this, you got to rotate one, you got to turn one, you got to do this, you got to do all this stuff. So there's enthalpy, which is the lower heat of the system of the new compound, but then there's also entropy, which is the disorganization of the system. In order to do this, to get them to move away from where they currently are to where they need to go, you got to put energy into the system. So it's what we call the transition energy, right? So think about where we are today, right? We're in the state where the system wants to change into a new state. But to get there, it looks like it's not changing, but it's gradually shifting into a new state until it eventually then, boom, locks into place. In chemistry and entropy-driven reactions like that, they are first very, very slow to start and then accelerate in rate over time. because what happens is, think of it this way. You start at a general energy level of this, but you've got to go to here before you can finish here. So this is where we are today with the two compounds separate. And then we got to raise the general, we got to climb this energy transition cliff, right? To get over that, to get the reorganization to happen. And then once that happens, then the entire energy of the new molecule is down here. And then excess heat is vented. That excess heat raises the background level. And so now the transition levels to the next, for the next molecule to react is lower and then lower. And then eventually it becomes a runaway train where the temperature of the system or the background energy of the system rises to the point where the transition energy level is already met and everything just happens en masse. So you can speed that reaction up by raising the temperature, but just assuming ceteris paribus that everything is just a steady state. Eventually it'll happen anyway. And then it's the Hemingway quote: how did you go broke? Slowly and then all at once. And it's the same kind of thing, but systems need that. And I think that the entropy argument about reorganization is a very important one. We're in the process now of reorganizing from one monetary system to another. Okay. And then we're going to probably reorganize again into another monetary system, which all the Bitcoiners in the audience will love, which is that, we're going to go to a next monetary system, which is going to be kind of a hybrid gold-backed nation state currency gold-backed system that will last for a certain amount of time, but it's going to be existing in the context of Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies, which are a superior form of money than gold for a digital economy, period, in every way imaginable that you can think of. Eventually that's going to win out anyway. And they're all going to have to get on board. Some of my patrons ask me all the time, like, Tom, when do you think the Federal Reserve adds Bitcoin to its balance sheet? And I'm like, sooner than you think.
Do you think they will?
At some point they will. They'll be forced to.
That's a nail in their coffin, though. It's like, all right, we lost.
Well, no, not necessarily. Not necessarily. I mean, yeah, in the long run, maybe. But again, it doesn't matter. Like, you're going to bow to reality at some point, Yeah. And again, this is part of the transition state. This is part of the transition process.
Well, I think I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say, I think the transition, I think we're getting to that suddenly part. I think we're at the beginning of the suddenly. Like, if you have Saki coming out and preparing people for a high inflation print, you have Shanghai shut down. It's only going to exacerbate the inflation problem, the bottlenecks in the supply chain. You have wheat being shut off from most of the world. Lebanon just got a wheat delivery that was completely bunk, and they don't have any money to buy more wheat. Right. You have bad wheat season here in the U.S. I believe that
you're gonna have a bad wheat season in Ukraine. They don't have any diesel fuel to run the tractors to even they run the seed machines. I mean, it's gonna be bad.
Yeah, you're gonna
because the Russians blew it all up.
Yeah, and you're gonna have.
And I'll be honest with you, they did it on purpose. I'm like, yeah, you got to buy the wheat from us. Oh, you want to start a war with us? Fine. We just killed the breadbasket of the world.
Yeah,
piss off. And it's gonna. And it was a late. And look, and the weather's getting screwy. Like, we're also coming into this. We're also coming into this very ugly period of time where, and this is part of the reason why I'm still a gold bug, by the way. Like, I mean, I love Bitcoin. Don't get me wrong, but I'm not smart enough. As smart as I am, I'm not smart enough to be smarter than the market. We're gonna need gold for a while. We may need gold as a transitional thing if all goes well, and then we'll transition to Bitcoin. That'd be great too. But then again, by the end of the decade, we're looking at a potential. We're looking at on a one to every day roll the dice that there's not a Carrington event that occurs because the sun burped, because the global magnetic field is so freaking low because of the pole shift that's undergoing right now.
Dive into that. What's going on there?
Oh, dude, this is big. This is the biggest tail risk for Bitcoin that I can come up with. Is
a solar flare? Or
yeah. So is we're living in an age where this is not conspiracy theory. This is data. All right. And there are plenty of guys out there on the internet, including at this point now NASA actually, discussing this, that the Earth's magnetic field is down about 25 or 26% from its peak, which occurred, which happened about a little over a century ago. So the Carrington event of 1859 actually occurred during, a period where the magnetic field was at its strongest. But the only electronic devices at the time were the telegraph wires. And that was a solar flare or a coronal mass ejection so large that it melted all the telegraph wires. Okay. Because, when the sun burps, it does bombard the atmosphere with a whole lot of highly charged particles that the ionosphere and the charged nature of, everything is a charged system and everything's in a magnetic field and like that gets transmitted down through the atmosphere and into the ground. Now, if the magnetic field is weakened, then that's the thing that keeps us from, that's the thing that protects us from the solar wind. If the Earth didn't have a magnetic field, you and I wouldn't be here talking because Earth would be lifeless. Earth would look like Mars. The saddest story in all of the solar system is that Mars lost its magnetic field at some point in the past. Don't know how. We haven't uncovered this yet, but there was life on Mars. There was an atmosphere on Mars, and then it lost its magnetic shield, and then it all got stripped away. So the idea of terraforming Mars is cute and all until we figure out how to create an artificial magnetic field for it to be able to hold the atmosphere and to protect it from the solar wind. Okay? So the Earth's magnetic field weakening significantly and continuing to weaken at about 1% a year. Okay? And it's going to do so until the poles finally shift. And the poles right now are rapidly moving. I think the North Pole is somewhere over Siberia. And it's moving significantly every year. I don't remember the actual numbers, but miles every year. I think it was 88 miles in 2021, something like that. It's something enormous.
How far does it have to go? 3,000?
It's going to go, and if the archaeological records of this are correct, it's going to go until they reach the area around the Bermuda Triangle and the opposite side on the opposite side of the world from there. It's going to wind up. The poles are going to do this, and then they're going to flip, and then they're going to go right back. It's going to do the North and South Pole are going to do. They're going to wander this way, and then they're going to flip, right? And so they're going to move to the equator, and then they're going to flip. Because
what happens? Is it like does that fuck up life on the surface, or is it just purely?
Yeah, a lot of things happen when that happens. There's a lot of things that could potentially go wrong. But for us in the near term, the thing you should worry about most is a Carrington-style event as the sun goes through its normal natural 11-year solar cycle. The sunspots are perturbations in the magnetic dynamos of the sun, and they are opposite poles in anomalies within the magnetic dynamos of the sun. There are 3 of them, and any one of them will create a solar flare or coronal mass ejection or something like that could hit the Earth, and in a weakened magnetic field, the magnetic field will not be able to shunt it off. Think of it like Green Lantern and putting up a shield, and someone's more powerful than him, and the shield breaks, and then he gets blown back. If his will is strong enough, he can hold through it. Right? Green Lantern is kind of a really good metaphor for this, actually. Being a comic geek, I can't help myself. So that happens. That could easily wipe out the grid.
Yeah, overnight.
Okay, let's just. I mean, we're back to the 19th century, and all electronic devices would then die, and the Bitcoin, thing, and the blockchain being on a satellite in space doesn't matter because the satellite will get fried, and so, but it doesn't matter at that point. We'll need gold, we'll need silver, we'll need bullets, we'll need food, we'll need all of those things, and then we'll rebuild society. But we know how to do Bitcoin again. So rebuilding off of something like that would be pretty quick because it won't take us. I mean, it's not like we don't have the knowledge. It's not like we don't have the textbooks and the libraries and everything for all the accumulated knowledge, hopefully all written down to get back to, we're not going to be starting from scratch again. We don't have to rebuild, we don't have to rebuild the 20th century from scratch or the 21st century from scratch. We'll be rebuilding it from a state of knowledge. So just to be a matter of, capital handling to get it built.
Yeah, God, that shit's scary.
It is scary. It's why you should have some gold. That's serious.
I've got some on my finger.
Good. So and look, gold is undervalued. Even if I'm wrong even if that doesn't happen, let's please hope that does not happen. Um, the powers that be still use gold as their reserve, as their proxy for reserves.
Mm-hmm.
And they're not changing that system. They're not changing that anytime soon. So if you know that that system is going to, if their system is going to fail, they have one of two options. They can either allow the price of gold to stay where it is and collapse the paper gold system completely, thereby cutting asset prices by somewhere between 90 and 95%, at which price your gold rises in purchasing power by 90 to 95%. Or they can allow the price of gold to rise and keep asset prices the same, at which point your gold rises in purchasing power by 90 to 95%, or orders of magnitude. It winds up being the same. It's the same thing. As Ron Paul would put it, hyperinflation and hyperinflation are two sides of the same coin. They are. It doesn't really matter. It's all about preserving purchasing power, which is all that matters when it comes to Bitcoin. I don't care about the dollar price of Bitcoin. Ultimately, I actually more care about the dollar price of Bitcoin as it relates to how much energy it can get me, how many real goods in the real world it can get me. And that's why they're trying to hold the price in place and trying to break the psychology of the bull market. But at the same time, all I see is Wall Street desperately trying to get into crypto and trying to get into Bitcoin. They're crowding into it. Bitcoin's terrible. We hate it. And they're all buying on the backside. You think Jamie Dimon doesn't own Bitcoin? If you don't think that Jamie Dimon owns Bitcoin, then I have some lovely bridge front property in Brooklyn I want to sell you.
They're definitely getting it. I mean, they have to if they're smart. They are smart people at the end of the day. They may be evil, some of them.
Well, yeah, no, I mean, it's very clear they can see the writing on the wall the same way we can. They're not dumb.
Yeah.
Like, when we're all reading price charts and giving perspectives on where we think this stock will go or that stock will go or what the dollar's going to do or what gold's going to do, you don't think they can, if I can read the chart, they can read the chart. And they have control of the chart. So, it's not that tough. What you have to wind up bracketing for is where do you think they are relative to that chart? And where do you think they are, or when do you think they're going to let the price rise so that they can make the maximal profit? And that's what they're doing to Bitcoin right now. Right now, I'm watching sentiment get crushed on the day. Why is this happening? Gold is breaking out. Inflation's high. It's the same whine that I heard last year from all the gold bugs.
Mm-hmm.
Negative real rates, and then well, so what? They control the price.
Yeah.
Just wait.
I mean, hopefully
there needed to be a catalyst, and the state change for this one. The catalyst for this was pegging the ruble to gold.
Yeah. Well,
that's the big one, and that's the one that was always gonna change the system.
Does this get this? Do we eventually get to like the Austrian dream of true price signal in the market? It's not manipulated by.
Not in my lifetime.
No,
not my lifetime. Nah. And that's okay. We'll get closer to it. Like everything is a continuum, Marty. This is the way I like to look at it, right? 500 years ago, we still had people like sacrificing their children to the sun gods in various parts of the world. We don't do that anymore. That's a win, right? Like, okay, so now we're trying to get people.
Some of the Davos class might do that.
Well, sacrificing babies to drink the adrenochrome and all that. I'm mostly kidding about that stuff.
They're going to Moloch.
Yeah. Well, I think actually what we have today is that these people have convinced people to sacrifice themselves on the altar of the sun god, right? Which is far worse. It just means that we're living through a dark age. But nothing goes up. No market goes up in a straight line. All markets are kind of cyclic. Well, guess what? Human liberty is cyclic too on a timeline. And it looks like the stock market. It's a random walk upwards and cyclic. And I think we're moving up and to the left on that chart through time. But right now we're in a nadir. And then that too will turn and then we'll start to rise again. And it is what it is. And we'll just move back and forth. But we're moving up that curve into a state of reemergence of enlightenment, I think, at some point in the future. The best thing that could happen, I think, is a return to some kind of real honest to God spirituality within the anarcho-crypto set. So we're not just, I just think that that's where we need to be. It's not just celebrating the fact that we have children, but understanding what the real purpose of actual living in this world is, and where our moral center is. And I think that was the thing that, when this kind of capped this off, going back to what I said originally, when I was at Bitcoin 2021 last year, and despite all the glitz and the money and all the stuff that I saw all the way around there, I really saw a bunch of hardcore narco phone freaks desperately trying to hold on to that, and resolute that Bitcoin is here to break these bastards.
Yeah.
And nothing else. And I saw that at every turn, and everybody I talked to. And that I walked away from Bitcoin 2021 going, everything's fine. Kids are all right.
Kids are all right. No, I do want to break these people. We do want to break these people. I'll speak
Absolutely.
for myself. I want to fucking destroy these people.
Of course, so do I.
What is, I echo in the background here, but what is an enlightened state to you? I think at the end of the day, what is, why do we have children? Why are we here?
We're here we're here for the beer, right? To quote Rush. Why are we here? Because we're here. We're dealing with the meaning crisis of the last 300, 400 years, right? Like, we've lost our connection to I don't like talking in terms of God, because I'm not a particularly, I'm not that enough of that bent, but I do believe that I do understand that there's something about the way the universe works that I don't understand, and I don't presume to understand, and I'm willing to submit to the will of that, whatever that happens to be. I'm just not willing to personify it, right? You want to call that God, you call that God, that's fine. I don't really care. What's important is that we as people have a purpose in this life, which is ultimately to do our very best to procreate the species, and to pass on what we've learned, and to minimize as suffering as much as possible. It's not all absurd. Life is not this absurd game of, well, we live, we die, and then and we're food for worms. I just don't buy that. So fundamentally, we got to where we are today because we had enough faith in ourselves to want to build something that we could pass on to our children to make their lives a little easier. Yeah. And that's how we alleviate human suffering, because the universe is hostile to our presence. The universe is trying to kill us. Period. You have to realize that the universe doesn't care that you're here, and will kill you. We live in, talked about, the sun and the burp and, all that stuff. Like, space is a really hostile place. And, Florida is a really hostile place. Like, dude, like, without air conditioning, Florida is unlivable. And, mosquitoes the size of Volkswagens, and, getting exsanguinated, and, every mold imaginable, and, alligator, not that alligators are really a threat, but just in general, like, there's so much life competing against you. It's not the world of plenty. It's literally a land, trying to kill you. I remember seeing a great cartoon I think it was during the 2016 campaign, like, all the things in Florida that can kill you, like, broken down by the highest cause of death. Like, it was a cartoon, so it was funny, alligators, this, Republicans, blah, 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 all the breaking up the state. And being a 35, I've lived in Florida now like 35 years or so. Like, I was just laughing my ass off going, yeah, that's true. That's true. That's true. And it's just really funny. It's a really hostile place. And you take away air conditioning and forget it. I don't want to live here, because this place is brutal, between the heat and the, everything molding and going bad, and like everything rots. And it's like, dude, like, how do you preserve food in Florida? There's no natural salt mines. There's no nothing. Like, I want electricity.
Well, you're highlighting. It's so funny. We've gotten to a stage where humans are. I mean, we have this self-loathing. Not me and you, but a lot of humans have this self-loathing where we're bad. We need to stop doing these things. What we have done is incredible. I'm speaking to you through the internet.
Yeah,
right
absolutely. Now. Absolutely. But I used to be very nihilistic about this stuff. I grew up thinking that it was all just, very cynical, kind of typical Gen Xer, kind of like, that quintessential John Cusack movie protagonist from any movie he made in between like 1985 and like the guy from like Grosse Pointe Blank, right? Mm-hmm. Like that guy, right? Pure iconoclast, all this kind of sucks. And then once I realized why I was so angry at everything, because I realized I was a libertarian, and that's why I hated politics. I'm like, oh, that's what's wrong with me. I'm a libertarian. Okay, I got it. And then it was this slow dawning. And I literally sat there one day and just going through all the basics of Austrian economics and read some article on Lou Rockwell one morning. And I just went, oh, I get it. People are fucking amazing because they produce all of this in spite of all of these things that have been, these barriers and obstacles that have been placed in front of them. They're not succumbing to them. They're not sheep. They're the exact opposite of that. That's why I get very angry when people use the term sheeple. I absolutely despise it because it's so degrading to very people that you're trying to convince of what it is that what you're seeing. Like, don't degrade those people.
I'm guilty of using that word.
I hate that word because it really is but hey, we've all done it. Like, it's just so, hey, by the way, don't do it anymore.
Wake up sheeple is just like a great little.
Yeah, I just think just how about understand why they're where they are, have a little empathy, and then try and figure out the best way to talk to them to get them out of it. Because, by calling them sheeple is, the one thing you're never going to do is get them to convince you otherwise.
Yeah.
Like the goal is understanding and empathy. And that's how we get out of this. That's how we beat these people. And that's really our purpose at the end of the day, is to expand human empathy.
Agreed there.
So
and I think you're doing a great job of doing that. And
I do try.
And I think we're going to win. And again, it comes back to the narrative battle, like conversations like this, and then not only creating empathy amongst our fellow common man, but highlighting how unempathetic the technocratic elite are and how hypocritical they are.
They're soulless. They have no purpose. They don't respect any higher authority. They believe that they're better than nature and that they're better than we are. These are people without boundaries. These are children that have never been given any boundary conditions or any control over their actions. And so, what they want is what they can get. And you're an idiot if you fall for it. So, hey, we're gonna keep making you fall for it, and then prove to ourselves that we're better than you are, and that we are entitled to rule you because you're just dumb tax cattle.
You're just a useless eater.
And then now they're just saying that out loud. And this is the part that should infuriate everybody. And the worst part about it is that, modern progressives, for lack of a better term, and not all progressives, but that I don't know even what to call these people. Like, they become the disciples of the high priests of Davos style nihilism, to say, yeah, maybe I'm a useless eater. Maybe if the world would be a better place if it wasn't for me. But no, I want to live because I'm the good person. We just need to kill all the deplorables. We need to kill all the Trump tards. We need to kill all the Q tards or the Russia bots or whatever. I'm like, no.
You stop having children.
We're all the ones with the guns. So.
Yeah, thank God for the
and
Second
know how
Amendment.
to use them.
Yeah. There was in Austin, Texas, and there was a Stop Having Children campaign here during South by Southwest, and it's like,
yeah,
could be Darwinism playing out too. It could be good. It's like, all right, you stop.
I think veganism is a self-correcting problem. I would never in a million years ever subscribe to veganism, but I actually encourage people I don't like to become vegans so that they don't breed. Because it's bad for them, and it'll kill them, and then they'll die early, or maybe they'll die before breeding age. I don't know. We'll see. Like, veganism is just bad. It's a bad way to eat.
It's bad for your teeth.
Carnivores.
It's bad for your health.
Bad for everything. It's just bad for everything. We're carnivores. We need large amounts of energy dense food because we have a very short digestive tract. It's that simple. Like, we're not cows. We don't have 4 stomachs to break down cellulose.
But speaking of the cows, they're just farting all the time, and they're contributing to global warming.
No, they're not. They're not, because CO2 isn't contributing to global warming. Like,
I know.
That's a dumb argument.
I'm having Tom Nelson on next week. I'm very excited to talk to him.
Oh, cool.
About this. But it's, and actually, I'm becoming more and more just emboldened and confident, and just like not being afraid of the mob when it comes to like global warming. I mean, like, I don't believe that.
I've never believed it. I went through the data. I went through the temperature data sets like 15 years ago. I was like, you got to be kidding me. I'm like, I come from a background when I worked in environmental testing, where all the data that I produced, I had to be able to back up in a court of law, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or my boss would have to could possibly be subpoenaed by a government agency to prove the quality of our data to is stated to the quality that we certified. Meaning you had to produce data that was clean enough for your dog to eat off of, for you to eat off of. The temperature data sets for global warming that man's hockey stick and all the rest of it that's built on, I wouldn't feed to my dogs.
How bad is it?
They're terrible. They're terrible. They just blithely pull out outliers left and right, violating all of Talib's black swan, methodology, because it doesn't fit the narrative. It's a purely political thing. I mean, this is 15 years ago when I went through the data, but the data sets raw and cleaned are, there's no there. I hate to quote Gertrude Stein because I can't stand her, but she's right. There's no there. There's nothing. It's noise. It's literally, they have cherry picked data to create statistical noise, add a statistical noise in order to create a thing, and to create a correlation where there is no correlation.
Yeah. And now people are trying to attack the Bitcoin mining industry with this climate hysteria, and I will not stand for it. I will.
No, it's just pure for. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I was gonna say I will mine with all the natural gas that I can. I'll drill wells to mine Bitcoin.
Absolutely. Go thou forth and be fruitful and multiply. Like I absolutely. This is the way it should be. Like, it's crazy. Like,
might save
these people are nuts.
Might save a few coal plants in the process too.
Oh yeah. Yeah, coal is great. Coal is great energy. I don't even have a problem. Yeah, I mean, NOx and SOx, which are NOx and SOx. In the industry, I literally used to do stack testing and analyze environmental labs for stack testing. We call it NOx and SOx, which is NOx and SOx, so nitrate X sub X and sulfate sub X, so SO2 SO3 NO2 NO3. NOx and SOx. I mean, yeah, that's just bad, but it's also easily scrubbed out of the friggin' stack. It's not even expensive. So and those are upgrades that, those are upgrades that can be done. And I'm not anti-environment. I'm certainly anti-pollution.
Yes.
I'm just not pro global communism to stop human viruses.
Yeah. And
the virus that is humanity.
I mean, yeah, conflating, like, you don't believe in climate change with you're not an environmentalist and you're a polluter is one of the most frustrating things in the world.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
I say it on this podcast all the time. I'm that dude that cleans up the beach. I yell at people when I see them littering on the beach.
Dude, my partner in the newsletter gets angry with me when we're sitting there talking on the phone. I'm talking about the latest things that we're composting, because I mean, it's like, I was talking to him this morning about the whole global electric circuit and how that may has a strong correlation with like coronary events and people dying of heart attacks, because with this charged atmosphere, the heart. He's like, when the hell did you turn into such a hippie? I'm like, dude, I've always been a hippie. Like, I'm just like, that's not hard. Like, you looked at my wardrobe, like, what are you kidding here? Like, I used to grow black soldier flies to feed to my chickens, for Christ's sake. Like, dude, I've done, I don't wear, you yell at me all the time that I never wear pants. Like, it's and I don't even like wearing shoes, Marty. I whenever I have to go out in public and I have to wear shoes for any length of time, because I work at home so often, for so long, I go days without putting shoes on. My feet they're becoming hobbit feet, and they don't like fit in my freaking shoes. It's crazy. If I wear shoes for more like 3 or 4 hours, I get angry. That's why I wear sandals all the time.
That's I'm a big barefoot. Like, I don't put shoes on until I absolutely have to leave the house.
Absolutely.
And
you're gonna make me wear shoes? God damn it.
In the summer, I'll go months if I'm down the shore in Jersey. I'll go months without wearing shoes.
It's like, I haven't had a pair. The only time it's the summertime, right? Or it's spring here in Florida, which is the summer for everybody else, and then it'll be summer for you guys, and we'll be in the 8th circle of hell. If I don't go out into the world, I won't even put on sandals. I might put on sandals because the sand in my front yard is so hot that I can't walk across it because it's on 200 degrees and it's melting
Mhm.
my feet. But other than that,
Yeah.
it's like it's just whatever. It's like, and I've got goats and I've got ducks and I've got all sorts of stuff I got to walk through every day, and I don't care. Whatever.
Yeah.
Wash your feet off and move on.
It's we need more barefoot warriors out there. I'm happy to know that you're one, and that it's people like you that make me think that we're gonna win.
I hope. Again, it's like everything else. I thank you, but what I'm really at the what I'm interested in at this point is just giving people as much good information as possible, trying to project forward what you're seeing today into into the near future, and hope that you're looking for the sign. I'm always hopeful, right? So I'm always looking for the signs where good things could be happening, right? Even though sometimes that may put me in a place which is where I'll put forth an idea which turns out to be false, or turns out to be wrong, or turns out to be overly optimistic. I really didn't think there was going to be a hot war in Ukraine. I was convinced there wasn't going to be a hot war in Ukraine, even though the signs were all there. And when you, and it's because in no way, manner, shape, or form did I want to believe that the neoconservatives within the U.S. and the U.K. Foreign policy establishment were strong enough to force a physical, kinetic confrontation with the Russians over Ukraine, which then has the possibility of leading to nuclear war, which is where we are today. And you discount that completely, or you put that in the 2% category, then it also means that, well, then there's not going to be a NATO war in Ukraine, and therefore there's not going to actually be a wider war between the Russian army and the Ukrainian army, because at the end of the day, the Russians are going to wipe out the Ukrainian army's infrastructure quickly with their superior weaponry, and then it's just a long, slow, ugly mop-up operation after that if the Ukrainians don't surrender, which is where we are today. And now that we see that NATO, led by the U.S. and the U.K., and really with the EU not really saying no. Here and there, Germany's trying to say no and yes at the same time. Yes, we still want to buy Russian oil and Russian natural gas, but yes, let's go to war with. It's like, yeah, Russia, we're going to go to war with you, but you can still sell us oil and gas. And the Russians are like, no,
That's not going to happen.
How about that? Yeah, how I don't think so. So they're playing that game, and but now we're at that point where they're pushing in a way that is really scary, and
Yeah.
I don't know.
Then you finally, I think I saw this on your feed too. Like the what was it? The city Bucha?
Yeah.
Bucha. And it turns out it was the Asmanov battalion.
The Azov battalion. So as of today, I saw, it was about a couple of hours ago, and I still haven't completely confirmed this, but it came from a news source Twitter feed. So that MI6 British intelligence stated that the massacre at Bucha was pulled off and or staged by the Ukrainian army, the Azov battalion, which comports with everything else I've heard about what's happened on the ground in Ukraine, that they've been, shooting people in the back for trying to leave the cities, and, and all the rest of it, because, the idea, and the Russians have overplayed this idea that there are Nazis running around everywhere in Ukraine. Like, they've overplayed this for propaganda purposes, and it's ham-fisted, but it's not untrue. Okay. They may have overplayed it, but it does not mean therefore it is untrue. That's bullshit. It's 70% true or 50% true. It's true enough that the Ukrainian leadership within both the military and the political class are driven by the Azov battalion and effectively neo-Nazis, but not the rank and file Ukrainian soldiers, not everyday civilians and everybody else. So in my mind, because I need to get going. I need to do the. I've got other work I've got to get done today, but I really enjoyed the chat. So, but the in my mind, MI6 making that announcement, who would be for me the the most likely candidate prime suspect number one for having staged Bucha in the first place, because they've staged every other damn false flag we've seen against Russia in the last 10 years. To come out and say that means that they have guys trapped in the steel mill, the steel complex in Mariupol, and they've made a horse trade. We'll give up on the Bucha narrative if you allow our guys to get out of there without an announcement that they were there officially in the first place. But everybody knows they're there. It's what's got French President Emmanuel Macron in hot water. Everybody knows that Mariupol was where a lot of French military was training Azov battalion, and coordinating operations for the Ukrainian military. And they were in Mariupol doing it. And now they got trapped. And then they tried to get out, and the Azov battalion guys that were there started using them as human shields because they knew that the Russians were going to come in and kill them all. That's why they're still trapped there. Yeah, I mean, the French tried multiple operations to get them out of there.
French and the British working directly with Nazis.
French and the British and the Canadians and the Americans. Everybody's in there.
Yeah.
Hundreds of people. Well, I don't know about hundreds, but let's say a couple hundred, upwards of a couple hundred.
Yeah. Lovely. This is what you're supporting with your tax dollars.
This is your tax dollars at work. So I get to go. This is why I got to go. I got to go home. I got to go downstairs and start, totaling up how much I get to send to Ukraine so that Zelensky can, kill Russians.
Yeah.
Great. Well, and his own people.
Thank you for your time. I know you're busy. Let's do it again sometime.
Whenever you want. All right. Just give me a call. I'll be happy to do it.
I will. Okay. Go have fun doing your taxes, and
yeah, I can't wait.
And I'll be in touch. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Marty. You have a great day now. Thank you.
You too. Peace and love.
Bye-bye.